Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty Roundtable Radio Talk Show.
All right. Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. Sam Bushman live on your radio. Hard-hitting news the networks refuse to use, no doubt, continues now. This is the broadcast for March 31st in the year of our Lord, 2025. Hour 2 at 2, promoting God, family, country, protecting life, liberty, and property, using the checks and balances brilliantly put in place by the Founding Fathers, promoting the supreme law of the land, the Constitution for the United States of America. That is our guide. Rejecting revolution, unless it's a Jesus revolution, then we're in, because we follow the Prince of Peace. With me now, Lowell Nelson, campaignforliberty.org. Welcome back to the broadcast, sir.
Well, it's my pleasure to be with you again, Sam. Good morning.
Shut her down, Lowell. That's the only thing I could say to what we've got today. Just shut her down, buddy.
We're talking about the Department of Education here in the United States on the federal level, the general government level.
We might need to recall. Hold on, Lowell. We might need to recall you or have you call back in or something real quick. I don't know why you're breaking up quite a bit. I want to get a clean feed from you the best I can. Lowell Nelson with me, ladies and gentlemen. Liz will take care of that. Campaignforliberty.org, RonPaulInstitute.org. You know, Campaign for Liberty has one of the best mission statements I've ever heard. You know, their goal is to deal with the economy by moving us back to honest money. They've focused on auditing and ending the Federal Reserve, something Trump said he'd do, but Congress seems to be sitting on their hands. I don't see a whole lot going on with it. We have an opportunity of a lifetime if we take advantage of it, and I pray that we can audit and end the Fed. That's one of Campaign for Liberty's biggest goals, and I think one of the greatest goals they have. They have plenty of others. Their mission statement's incredible. Find your leader at campaignforliberty.org and make friends with him. Get to know them, work with them. Campaign for Liberty, one of the premier organizations in America. That and John Birch Society are the two longest-lasting, in my mind, greatest organizations. But I really appreciate Campaign for Liberty and all that they've done. You know, people mocked Ron Paul when he ran the first time. You don't have an infrastructure on the ground. And boy, how did he take it seriously. And now he has one of the greatest organizations on the ground, Campaign for Liberty, sister organization, Young Americans for Liberty on college campuses across the country. Man, they've made a tremendous difference, and they continue to do so. So my response is shut her down, Lowell.
Well, I'm with you there, Sam. We're talking about the Department of Education at the federal level. You know, you probably discussed this last week. It seemed to be big news, right? Trump's executive order to shut her down. The executive order directs the Secretary of Education, quote, to the maximum extent appropriate and permitted by law, take all necessary steps to facilitate the closure of the Department of Education and return authority over education to the states and local communities, end of quote. So this action is really directed to be taken, though, quote, while ensuring the effective and uninterrupted delivery of services, programs, and benefits on which Americans rely, end of quote. That's a little concerning, that last part, because I don't know of any services, programs, and benefits provided by the Department of Education on which Americans rely. But maybe there's some. I don't know what they are. Maybe they'll be moved to other areas of the bureaucracy. Who knows?
Well, and that's the scary part. So the part about what you're talking about says this action is directed to be taken, though, while ensuring the effective and uninterrupted delivery of services, programs, and benefits on which Americans rely. Now, see, to me, if you're not very careful, that negates the whole first part, Lowell.
Exactly.
Because any education czar, any education, you know, the pro-education lobbies and everything else, they're going to be like, hey, you can't disable that. We don't have something. In all 50 states, we don't have something in place to handle that. It'd be like at the Supreme Court, hey, you know, we're abolishing, we're pushing abortion to the states. But we got to make sure women can continue getting abortions. What? Okay, it's that kind of a... So I personally think the executive order is shooting us in the foot, and they're never going to get anything done on this. That's my opinion. What do you say?
Well, I'm apprehensive about it. I did see news footage of the employees of the Department of Education walking out of their offices, for the last time. Many of them in tears, and of course that was the big news by the mainstream media, was that these people are now out of a job and they're hurting, and we shouldn't be doing this, and what a travesty this is, and so forth. But I suppose that. Nothing could happen, but there are some people that are, going to have to turn to other avenues to support themselves, and I think that's a good thing. So we'll see on this. I hope we get her shut down. It was created just 45 years ago, Sam, in 1979. I know you know that, and that was a decade after Apollo 11 landed on the moon and returned to the Earth, right? So it's not like we were suffering scholastically or academically because we did not have a Department of Education. So you have to ask the question, why in the world was it created in the first place? Well, the response you'll get is that this was a U.S. response to the Soviet Sputnik satellite and was targeted initially towards science education in 1979. But I don't know, it just seems like in the last 45 years, if you look at what the Department of Education has done or not done, then you really call into question the value of the department. Sadly, education in America has declined. According to a recent assessment, about 70%, that's almost 3/4 of 8th graders, are below proficiency in reading, and about 72% are below proficiency in mathematics. I mean, that's horrible. We used to be the leader, right? U.S. used to be a leader in these things. Well, and the problem isn't a lack of money, even though that's what advocates for public education will claim. The real problem, according to Ron Paul here in his column, is, quote, education funding is controlled by politicians and bureaucrats who impose a one-size-fits-all model on schools, end quote. Well, in my view, Sam, the government school system
and I agree.
pushes all...
Hold on. I agree it's the one-size-fits-all that's part of the problem. The real problem, ladies and gentlemen, is it's not the proper role of limited constitutional government, okay? It's part of the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto. It's the 10th plank, which is compulsory education for all. Stealing from Americans and putting it in this education basket, and all they've done is destroyed the real literacy, real education, a real ability for Americans and their children and the next generations to think for themselves. And all I say is, don't hurt me, don't take my stuff, just leave me alone. I educated my own kids. I didn't use a single government penny to do it, and I've got 8 of them. So we can all do this, and we've got to take this seriously. It's going to just get worse if we're not careful. And if we're not careful, if we have this clause in there that Donald Trump has, hey, this executive order directs it to all be shut down except for, hey, got to make sure we keep all the services, programs, and benefits on which Americans rely. Okay, they're not disassembling anything. It's a game being played. But I think about this idea of Bill Gates in relation to this, because there's a headline that relates to it in the news this morning. Bill Gates exposes the frightening future of AI. Basically, Bill Gates is claiming that artificial intelligence, or AI, will replace doctors and teachers within the next decade. So, hey, we're just letting them off early, Lowell.
Yeah, I read a similar article about AI too, Sam, and it noted that it's very different. It's a revolutionary change, very different from the change where people move from the farms into factories. Right, that was one technological change where we became more, I guess, mass production oriented and able to put out far greater output than before. Well, that still required workers, whereas this AI, it's going to replace the humans, right? And we won't need any humans. The author of this article I was reading posited that was one reason they wanted to reduce the human population on the planet by about 7.5 billion people, because we wouldn't need so many useless eaters, because AI would take over all of the thinking of the humans now do. And so, I don't know, it was a pretty sobering article. I don't believe that, by the way. I don't think the AI is going to replace humans.
Isn't it true that every disruptive technology that's come along, people want to tell you the sky is falling, and what you do is you double down in fear and lose your trust in God when you reject fear and have faith and say, look, God's still in charge, people. Don't you forget that. And yes, there'll be a different role for humans as technology continues to advance. But this idea that we don't need humans, God says there's plenty and room to spare. And the admonition to multiply and replenish the earth has never been rescinded, sir.
That's exactly right. There's more than enough for us to do here. And so it's not, I think AI is wonderful. It's a great aid to technology, but it is not going to replace the need for humans to learn and think, and that's the purpose of education. Growing up, I learned, Sam, that I always heard the saying, don't let schooling get in the way of your education.
All right, hang tight. Skip the break. Continue, Lowell.
Yeah, and so what we mean by that, or what my parents meant by that, was that your education is far more important than your schooling. Schooling is a very small part, and of course, I went to public school. I went to a government school back in the days in 1960s and early 70s. It was a little bit different back then. They weren't pushing, DEI, and they weren't pushing transgenderism and so forth. We actually learned reading, writing, and arithmetic, and we read the classics, and we talked about them, and we learned logic. I mean, it was very different back then, and so it was really valuable. And so it was educational to be in school. The reason I guess I'm digressing a little bit on this point, Sam, is because the Libertas Network recently acquired Praxis.
All right, so hold on. Before you go on that, I want to just kind of build this bridge for a second. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's the problem. The education system, the Department of Education, is an absolute abject failure. Education has done nothing but become propaganda via the government, bureaucrats, and parties in charge. It's a shame and a disgrace. And the answer is we got to shut it down, as Ron Paul wisely wrote. Campaignforliberty.org, ronpaulinstitute.org. But check out his incredible column about shutting down the Department of Education. Now, because this is Liberty Roundtable Live, we don't like to just bring you negative news. We want to bring you the solutions. Here are the solutions. Now continue, Lowell.
Oh, thank you. Great bridge, Sam. Praxis is a university, and I'm sorry, it's not a university. Praxis is a program where young adults launch a successful career without needing a college degree. And I must add, without incurring tens of thousands of dollars of debt in the process. I mean, this is the allure of Praxis, and it is working for hundreds of students. Now, the Libertas Network acquired Praxis because they want to 10x what Praxis was doing. They want to provide this opportunity for tens of thousands of students, not just hundreds of students. And so they're talking about 10xing Praxis, and they're both together. The leadership of the Libertas Network is working together, the leadership of Praxis, to make this happen. Now, this really grew out of the success of the Tuttle twins, which the Connor Boyack there at the Libertas Institute wrote, and it's now made into a cartoon. I mean, the Tuttle twins are doing great, and what that is it's a series of books of classics rewritten for adolescents and for young teens. Well, these teens have grown up in the last 5 or 10 years. They're now looking at colleges, universities, and they're looking very seriously at Praxis. Well, we need Praxis to be bigger and better, a broader reach, so that these young teens who have grown up now can get into Praxis, learn a trade, apprentice with the very best in the industry, and then go to work in that industry without ever going to college. You don't need a college degree. So Praxis isn't for everybody, maybe, but it is for a lot of great young students who want to be entrepreneurs, who don't want to go through college and incur lasting, debt, and who are ready now to be entrepreneurs. They want to hit the ground running. I have heard many testimonials, Sam, of students at Praxis who they'll go and apprentice with a business in which they have an interest. Maybe marketing, it may be engineering, it may be computer science, whatever. They get in, they apprentice at with these businesses, and in 2, 3, 4 years, not only are they earning a paycheck, but they're earning valuable experience. And at the end of that time, their apprenticeship, they often get hired, by their employee ship is continued by the company that gave them the apprenticeship. And they don't have debt. They are working, and they're 4 or 5 years ahead of their peers that went to school, incurred debt, and got a college degree, a piece of paper that their employer never asks about. The employer is not interested in whether you have a piece of paper anymore, Sam. They're interested in whether you can do the job, whether you can add value to their company, to their product, and their services. And so I'm a big fan of Praxis, and I'm a big fan of the Libertas Network, and I'm glad that that acquisition happened. It happened very quickly. Looking for great things to come out of that, Sam. And so this truly is a solution that you talked about.
And I'm a big fan of the Ron Paul curriculum as well, Lowell.
Yeah, you know, he wrote this and with Tom Woods about a decade ago, maybe 15 years ago. It was it was about 15 years ago. And the Ron Paul curriculum is for parents who are looking for a homeschooling curriculum incorporating the ideas of liberty, right? That's the parents that should consider Ron Paul's online curriculum. It's designed to be self-taught, with students helping and learning from each other via online forums. Starting in the 4th grade, students are required to write at least one essay per week. Students post their essays on their blogs. Students also take a course in public speaking. The curriculum does emphasize the history, philosophy, and economics of liberty, but it never substitutes indoctrination for education. The goal is to produce students with superior critical thinking skills, end of quote. So that is the Ron Paul curriculum in a nutshell. Sam, we should hasten to add here that the John Birch Society also has an excellent curriculum called Freedom Project Academy, I believe. It's been a while since I've looked at that, but they too have some excellent coursework that you can self-learn, self-teach, and so really the internet is abounding. I look at Brian, what's his name? Brian, the historian, has coursework on the internet. This is very helpful, focusing on history.
The Khan Academy is another great thing that started out as as an uncle wanted to help his nieces and nephews with math, and that grew into a big education system that's free as well. And with ChatGPT and some of these other technologies, you can gain knowledge on any topic and any subject that you want to. There's more and more of this kind of education available. American Heritage Schools provides online education, and many, many others. But I want to point out one other thing that I find fascinating. I don't know if you know, but universities are realizing that a lot of people don't want their general eds. A lot of people don't want 4-year degrees. And so they've created these certificate programs with educators that are partnering with the university. So my son, for example, went to one of these for web development. Now he's a web developer. And I can't remember the length of the thing, but it was basically a whole year of school worth. And what it was is the same degree that you get when you go to a 4-year degree, except without all the general eds and without all the garbage that you don't need. And so he basically went 1 year, got this certificate. Now he has this certificate. And now he's got, 7, 8 years in the web development industry, several years, to where that certificate plus longevity in the field, in other words, work experience, it's more than a degree at this point. It's beyond the degree. He's needed everywhere, makes good money. Well, same thing's true. I've got another son-in-law that's doing a marketing and a social media marketing degree that's similar. And so you start to see universities, people are realizing that, hey, all this propaganda, general ed stuff needs to go away. If you're not educated enough from a high school point of view to go on and do something specialized, you never will be. And that's the propaganda of never-ending education. Forget the education system. Forget the school system. Let's have never-ending learning built into our hearts and minds and belief systems, and let's jettison this. You got to fork over never-ending money for the, quote, privilege. Those days are gone, sir.
Well, and your son is walking in the footsteps of people like Thomas Jefferson and other of the founders, the framers. See, they got their education by the time they were 14, 15, 16 years old, Sam. They had the equivalent of college education here nowadays. They learned Latin and Greek, and they were reading Latin and Greek, and they were studying the great writers, Locke and Montesquieu and others. They were well educated. You would look at these gentlemen and at 16 years of age and well educated. I mean, they were phenomenally educated. They didn't attend some public school, some government school. They learned. They had tutors. They were apprentices. So really, that's the model that we're hoping to return to. We meaning, I think Libertas Network and others involved in the education of our youth, not public schooling. Sam and I have been adamant about this for years. Get your children out of the public schools, the government propaganda camps, and into something that really has value, that will educate, not just school, that will teach a person to discipline himself and to learn on his own rather than be indoctrinated by.
So here's the interesting thing. I was my son's employer at the time, and he came to me and said, "Hey, I'd like to get this certificate. What do you think of it?" And I reviewed the program, and I said, "This is phenomenal." And I literally, as an employer, helped fund that certificate for him so that he wouldn't go in debt. He got out of school, still works for me part-time, doing projects that I need, but now he works full-time developing educational software, believe it or not. And he started out working with senior programmers that knew more than him. He was kind of the junior apprentice for pay, if you will. But now he's kind of growing out of that too and gaining. Now he's a project manager for some of these projects. And he's taking on all these other responsibilities. It's just tremendous. Here's what you need to do. Give people a basic education, solid reading, writing, arithmetic, history, a little bit of science, and then build in a love for learning. And then once they get to the age of out of high school age, 16, 17, 18, whatever, let them find what they're interested in. And before you know it, if you leave them alone, they'll know more about it than you do in about a year or two. Guaranteed.
It doesn't take long for them to acquire that information. I mean, just rubbing shoulders with a mentor for 2, 3, 4 years. I mean, you can master trade and be in your own right, just like your son. Pretty much a project manager and doing your own thing. That's phenomenal, Sam. I'm so happy to hear that.
So he runs a web development team, and I know a lot about web development, but he's probably forgot more now about it than I know, Lowell.
I know what you mean.
Anyway, we wanted to highlight that because we want to give you guys solutions, and we wanted to bring it to reality. It's not something we just talk about in a vacuum on the radio. It's something that we literally breathe and live, work towards, pray for. All my children have been either homeschooled, which I agree with Lowell. We don't like that term. They life learned from home, and then they went to a private school to finish up their education because sometimes when they get that old, like my son's studying calculus, and he's forgot more about that than I know. And anyway, it goes on and on. But we digress. There's tons of opportunities for education. Let's embrace them and shut down the Department of Education yesterday. But my fear is by the wording of that end phrase concerns me. They're not really going to shut it down, Lowell. It's a Ponzi scheme. It's a game. They're just going to say, look over here while we, annihilate this, take a ton of credit for it. But they're going to move a lot of those core services to other places. And the proof is in the last line of that executive order. Congress is doing nothing. So even if they get a big fanfare, it sounds like success, beware, because the devil will be in the details. For example, your freedom of speech. Will that last this thing? Will that outlast this, you think, Lowell?
Wow, I don't have a lot of hope there. It's a fun little column here by Andrew Napolitano, though. He's talking about the brief history of the freedom of speech. And as I read through this column, Sam, it seemed to me like it could also have been entitled A Brief History of the Suppression of Speech, because that's really what our history is, of both freedom and suppression of speech. We'll talk about it after this important break, Sam.
You're listening to Liberty Roundtable Live.
protecting your liberties. You're listening to Liberty News Radio.
News this hour from townhall.com. I'm Rich Thomason. Elon Musk says tomorrow's election for the Wisconsin Supreme Court is of the utmost importance, and to prove it, he visited Wisconsin over the weekend, rallying in Green Bay, giving away what is, for him, some pocket change.
Elon Musk handing to potential Wisconsin voters who signed the petition decreeing judicial activism $1 million checks Sunday night, hours after the state Supreme Court rejected an attempt to stop it.
I think this will be important for the future of civilization. It's that significant.
Tuesday's Wisconsin State Supreme Court election will determine the ideological makeup of a court likely to decide key issues like abortion and labor rights in a battleground state. I'm Julie Walker.
President Trump says he is looking at ways that he could possibly serve a third term, suggesting that he would be bowing to the will of the American people if he did so.
The president told NBC News that he's not joking about exploring ways to overcome the U.S. Constitution, which limits presidents to 2 terms in office. He talked about it later with reporters aboard Air Force One.
I'm just telling you, I have had more people say, please run again. I said, we have a long way to go before we even think about that.
The 22nd Amendment says no one can be elected president more than twice. Greg Clugston, the White House.
A heads up for some rough weather across parts of the country today.
In general, it's close to around 70 million people that could potentially be impacted by the severe weather as we go over the next couple days.
Mark Chenard at the National Weather Service saying that today parts of the east could see strong thunderstorms, bringing heavy rains, possibly hail, and even isolated tornadoes. On Wall Street, the Dow is down about 126 points. The Nasdaq off more than 300. More on these stories at townhall.com.
Financing a home, especially in today's market, is one of the biggest decisions you'll make for your family. Work with a mortgage company that puts you first. I do. Work with a lender founded on biblical principles like do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. I do. It's Mike Gallagher for the only mortgage company I've used for almost a decade now when financing or refinancing Fellowship Home Loans. I'm friends with the owners, Mike and Brian. I even have them on my show occasionally. I know the care their team puts into every single customer. I can personally tell you that it's a smooth, stress-free process, and that's due to Fellowship's level of service and expertise that puts you in the right loan for your family and your goals. There's a reason Fellowship Home Loans is flooded with 5-star reviews. Whether purchasing a home or a cash-out refi to consolidate some higher interest debt, you can trust Fellowship Home Loans. Start the process. Make the call. 800-510-MIKE, 800-510-MIKE, 800-510-6453. Fellowship Home Loans, mortgage lending by the book.
Nationwide Mortgage Bankers, Equal Housing Lender, NMLS number 819382.
The Foundation for Moral Law is a nonprofit legal foundation committed to protecting our unalienable right to publicly acknowledge God. The Foundation for Moral Law exists to restore the knowledge of God in law and government and to acknowledge and defend the truth that man is endowed with rights not by our fellow man, but by God. The foundation maintains a twofold focus. First, litigation within state and federal courts. Second, education. Conducting seminars to teach the necessity and importance of acknowledging God in law and government. How can you help? Please make a tax-deductible contribution, allowing foundation attorneys to continue the fight. You may also purchase various foundation products as well at morallaw.org. Located in Montgomery, Alabama, the Foundation for Moral Law is a nonprofit, tax-exempt 501c3 founded by Judge Roy Moore. Please partner with us to achieve this important mission. morallaw.org.
This is a battle between truth and deceit, a battle between forces that would enslave this country in darkness and between a media that wants to present you with the truth. We are being censored. America's news outlets no longer provide the truth. 90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in fact.
theepictimes.com.
Looking for an IT partner that truly understands your needs? Managed IT Services is the answer. We meet with you regularly to discuss your goals and form a tailored technology plan. Our customers have called us a trusted advisor who delivers. When it comes to IT, we do it all. Firewalls, cloud storage, server migration, and more. Say goodbye to long-term contracts and hello to a team that earns your business month after month. Call 801-706-6980 now and let Managed IT Services transform your IT experience.
Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty Roundtable Radio Talk Show.
Well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Lowell Nelson riding shotgun this morning here on Liberty Roundtable Live with Sam Bushman, your host. We've been talking about education, the importance of shutting down the Department of Education, but the importance of getting a good education, not just schooling, but education. And we talked about a number of ways we can do that. And, of course, knowing our history is an important aspect of education. So part of our lifelong learning here, wanted to review the brief history of the freedom of speech or the suppression of speech, as the case may be. James Madison, who drafted the Bill of Rights, insisted upon referring to speech as the freedom of speech, not just a freedom or freedom of speech, but the freedom of speech. Because he wanted to emphasize that it is that really that freedom pre-existed the government. It came from our creator, the freedom of speech, the freedom to think, the freedom to act for ourselves, right? That freedom is what he
to make your point, it starts out with the right.
Mm-hmm.
It's a right, not a privilege, not granted by governments. It's an inalienable right given to us by God Almighty to express ourselves, to think as we wish, freedom of expression and freedom of agency, right?
That's right, Sam. And I think that was probably the second most important gift we received from our Creator, life being the first gift, life itself being the first and most important. The Creator who gave us life then granted us our agency and really commanded us to use that agency wisely, right, righteously, to help one another, to love one another. And if we learn to use our agency in that way, then we'll be blessed by heaven. Now, each one of the ratifiers of the Bill of Rights manifested in their writing with one another their unambiguous understanding that the freedom of speech is a natural right, just as Sam said. It's personal to every human. Does not come from government. It comes from, well, Napolitano said, it comes from within us. Sam and I would say it comes from our Creator. It cannot be taken away by legislation or executive command. It does not require a permission slip. Yet, a mere 7 years after the ratification of the Bill of Rights, during the presidency of John Adams, Congress enacted the Alien and Sedition Acts. These were 4 separate bills, basically, which punished speech critical of John Adams. Not critical of Thomas Jefferson as VP, but if you criticize the president, boy, you're in deep trouble. Now, I've often, Sam, wondered how this turnabout could have come about. How could the people who wrote and ratified the Bill of Rights just half a dozen years later outlaw the freedom of speech? I really want your thoughts on this. I would chalk it up to the lust for power and influence, whatever will keep them in the seats of power in Congress. But do you have any other insights on this, Sam? Why did they pass these Alien Sedition Acts just 6 years after ratifying the Bill of Rights?
Because I think the founding fathers were wise in trying to help you understand both sides of an issue. In every area of the world, there are contrasts, right? There's right versus wrong, good versus evil. There's opposites. And in the world in which we live, understand that according to the scriptures, it's a fallen world. So everything goes from order to disorder by very nature. And it takes energy to create or to maintain or to increase order over disorder. And the reason that I bring this whole philosophy behind my answer up is because in this case, they're saying, look, you have the right to freedom of the press, freedom of religion. You can't promote or deny religion, freedom of the press, freedom of my ability to say what I want to. Then a redress of grievances. It's no mistake that the redress of grievances is the last one of that list. There's 5 guarantees in the First Amendment. The last one, redress of grievance, really highlights kind of the issue. It's even if you take away the first 4, I should be able to go back and correct that with the 5th guarantee. Anyway, so they wanted to highlight, you know what, but your free speech should not be tampered with by government. At the same time, there are limits to your free speech. For example, if I literally breathe out threatenings that someone's going to, die, and don't misunderstand my words, I'm not saying anything like that, people. Or if I yell fire in a crowded theater, or if I, there's some speech that is against the law. There's free speech, I get it and agree. But there's also boundaries to that free speech. When do you go into an insurrection? When do you go into, in other words, there's libel laws and slander laws that kind of highlight the same point. When have you crossed the line? Well, the answer is my rights end where yours begin, Lowell. And if people understand that fundamental principle of self-government, we don't have a problem. When people cross that line, though, hey, you've gone too far. And so I think they were trying to set up a structure to when you understood, hey, free speech is protected when government's not tampering with it. At the same time, citizens, be wise and understand you can't say or do anything you want to under the name of free speech or free association. There are limits to that. If you're getting together to peacefully assemble, by all means, have a good time. You're getting together to destroy private property? No, whoa, hold on, wait a minute. We've turned free speech, free expression, free assembly into a riot scenario, and we claim it's okay? No, you've crossed the line. So I think they were trying to give us the appropriate guardrails.
Well, that's a great perspective there, Sam. I think that there's a lot to that. I think property rights comes in, right? You can't yell fire in a crowded theater, not because you don't have the freedom to speak, but because that's someone else's property, and you're endangering the lives of others, by doing that, right? And so I think that infringes on their freedom, their liberty.
Well, now, if there really is fire, hold on, if there really is fire in the theater, can you yell fire in the theater?
Oh, sure, absolutely, yeah.
And that's the point. Right. Think about that example, though, that really articulates what we're talking about. When the whole purpose of government should be negative, in other words, defensive, not positive or affirmative, not offensive. And when government does that, it fulfills its role. When it goes to that offensive mode, it's crossed the line. It's out of control. Anyway, Judge Napolitano, sorry to get so far afield, in my opinion, lays out a great history of this and the opposites that we bounce back and forth in this pendulum that it relates to. And I highlight that we, the people, need to become self-governed. When are you saying something that you have every right to say versus when are you being more destructive? And who should be the one to provide those guidelines? And the founders did their very best to say, hey, here's your 5 guarantees, but there are limits. And we, the people, need to kind of understand those things, right?
Yeah, and I think it makes your point here. Napolitano talks about the Federalists. They're the ones who wanted this Leviathan central government, such as we have today. The Federalists, to them, infringing upon the freedom of speech meant only silencing it before it was uttered. Today we call that prior restraint, and the Supreme Court has essentially outlawed it. Now, to the Anti-Federalists, Thomas Paine types, who believed the central government was a limited voluntary compact of states, as envisioned by the framers and the ratifiers. The First Amendment prohibited Congress from interfering with or punishing any speech. Well, the Adams administration, John Adams administration, prosecuted and convicted anti-federalists, among them a congressman, for their critical speech. Well, and then the pendulum swung the other way. Jefferson won the presidency. He was our 3rd president. And the Anti-Federalists won control of Congress, and they repealed 3 of the 4 Alien and Sedition Acts on the eve of their departure from Congress because they didn't want those acts used against them. So there's the pendulum swinging back and forth. And then during the Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln locked up hundreds of journalists in the North, including one congressman who were critical of his war efforts. And so the pendulum was swung back the other way in that. And then World War I, Woodrow Wilson arrested students for reading the Declaration of Independence aloud at draft offices or singing German beer hall songs, right? So you see the freedom, the suppression of speech as the pendulum was swinging way over on that end. Lincoln argued that preserving the Union was more important than preserving the First Amendment, which I disagree with, of course. And Wilson argued that the First Amendment only restrained Congress, but not the president. Ha! Well, both arguments have since been rejected by the courts.
Well, and wisely so. The Founding Fathers laid out their intent. Their logic was, hey, nobody who has lawmaking authority can make a law here. And then they explain what it relates to. They didn't mention the president because by nature the president doesn't make law. They didn't mention the courts because the courts don't make law. So we're playing games here, and this is where we violate the checks and balances. We don't understand the proper role of government. We don't understand the intent of the Founding Fathers. This is really the problem. And we're not very careful when we violate freedom of speech and freedom of the press and freedom of association and freedom, to peacefully assemble and freedom to have a redress of grievances. When we violate all that, our republic is on the brink. Divided against itself, it shall surely fall. So it brings up this smells like war discussion a little bit, Lowell, because that's what it eventually leads to.
That's right, Sam. And it's during the time of war when these constitutional safeguards are the most important. And yet that's when, during wartime, that's when most of these encroachments upon our freedom occur. We need to defend ourselves, right? And so that's really when most of our freedoms get taken away from us is during wartime, unfortunately. And so we just need to be aware that the freedom of speech is it's a right that we have. It should be respected by government, and Trump is accused of being of criminal activity on January 6th of 2021, right? But he shouldn't have, because he was just as free to talk about patriotism and the importance of election integrity as anyone else was. So I don't know. It's a great discussion, Sam. I love the column, and the bottom line here is that punishing speech and association is a very dangerous effort because it is subjective, value-free, and there will be no end to it. The remedy for threatening and hateful speech is more speech, speech that challenges the speaker. And that's how the Supreme Court's defined it, by the way, is that anytime you can also have speech to rebut the speech that you've just heard, you're free to do that. I don't know, Sam. This article reminded me of one more quote by Ezra Taft Benson, where he said, "It's important to always stand up for the right, even when it's unpopular. No," he says, "I should say, particularly when it is unpopular." So that's what you're doing. That's what Liberty Roundtable is doing, Sam. And we so appreciate the defense, the position that you take here on Liberty Roundtable to defend the freedom of speech. Sam?
Well, and I find that interesting, too. Ezra Taft Benson, former Secretary of Agriculture, also said, make popular that which is good and honorable and right, and make unpopular that which is base and no good and wrong and evil. And you know what? That's what we need to spend our time doing, Lowell. And I think, free speech, personally, if you can keep the bureaucrats out of it, does very well. Most people know not to cross the line. And sadly, the more government gets involved in violating our rights, the more people want to cross the line to counterbalance that. It's not a good plan. It's not great tactics. It's not a great solution. But I get the problem and the frustration. And that's why people are rioting in the streets now, because they don't understand the proper role of government. When you break people's tie to God, family, and country, you've got nothing left, Lowell.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Sam. We need, the very best government is self-government. And what's required for self-government? Well, a person needs a value system. They need to understand that there is a judge higher than themselves and that they will be called to account for their actions. If they have a belief in God, in other words, they will be more likely to govern themselves wisely than not. This belief in God is so very important. Its proper understanding of the proper role of government requires a belief in God, else you just can't have self-government, and you have a multiplicity of laws layered upon laws, and that really is a sign of the moral decay of a nation. Is if you have millions of laws and regulations and stuff, that's just a sign of how far that nation has decayed. So, but with self-government, you don't need laws like that, Sam. If we have a republic, if we can keep this republic, then we wouldn't need thousands and thousands of pages of laws that are on the books today. That's just a testament to our decay, Sam.
Couldn't agree more. And the solution is for people to first, we got to understand, it's we the people that need to govern ourselves. Self-governance is really what the Founding Fathers depended on. They depended on a moral and a religious people looking to God. And if you keep the Ten Commandments, there's not a whole lot of harm you can do to others around you. And my rights end where yours begin and vice versa. And we need to not seek for power. We need to seek to pull it down, ladies and gentlemen. And if we're not very careful, I've been mentioning that I think that they're going to turn Donald Trump into a wartime president. Others are starting to fear the same thing. Daniel McAdams among them, Lowell.
That's right. His article found at ronpaulinstitute.org talks about Diego Garcia, which apparently is an island. It's a military base in the Indian Ocean, just 2,000 miles southeast of Iran. Well, according to press reports, this is the most significant, press reports indicates a significant amount of U.S. military power has been on the move this past week, including several B-2 strategic bombers which have landed at the U.S. military base in Diego Garcia. And so according to press reports, this is the most significant B-2 presence on the island in nearly half a decade. In addition, flight trackers are showing increased activity by at least 9 KC-135R refueling aircraft in the region, and several C-17 cargo planes have been spotted by satellites on the island. The U.S. president has ordered U.S. carrier strike group Carl Vinson to the Mid-East. While the administration continues to escalate its illegal bombing campaign against Yemen, some are reporting more than 60 strikes today alone. And President Trump promises that they will continue for a long time. Well, speculation is increasing that the Diego Garcia buildup is the beginning of the long process of positioning U.S. military muscle for an attack on Iran. End of quote. Well, Sam, I certainly hope this is not true, but the movement of military assets into position for war is not promising. It's not promising activity.
And when you say you don't know if it's true, you don't know how far this will go. The fact that they're already positioning equipment is true and is a fact, as reported.
Right. That's right. Yeah, that's what I meant, Sam. I hope that we are not going to
Donald
attack
knows better,
Iran. Right? Boy, so that's for sure. And so so Daniel McAdams in his column here, he's asking a question. So is the U.S. president elected with the promise to end wars rather than start them, ready now to launch a war against the modern, technologically advanced nation of 90 million people with extremely complicated terrain, advanced military capabilities, and a newly signed strategic partnership treaty with Russia? That's the question. No one knows. He says Congress seems uninterested in its constitutional obligation to serve as the red light, green light for war. There has been nary a peep over Trump's bombing of Yemen to basically send a message, as he said to his top aides. Incredible column, Sam.
Well, I wonder when Congress is going to get the backbone. I hope before it's too late would be my response to that.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel wrote another column that's worthy of discussion.
Yeah, it's talking about the recent spring conference in Lake Jackson, Texas. Ron Paul Institute holds a spring conference, and they're going to hold a summer conference as well in a few months. This spring conference featured Chris Rossini, David Stockman, Daniel McAdams, Jeff Deist, Tom Woods, Representative John Duncan Jr., and, of course, Ron Paul himself. They each spoke 20, 30. Ron Paul took 40 minutes. And their speeches are captured on video that you can watch. I watched a few of these last night, or certain parts of a few of them. If you visit ronpaulinstitute.org right now, you'll see Daniel McAdams' article, and in the article is a link to the conference playlist. You can click that link, and you can just listen to these 6 speakers at the conference. Very, very good, 7 speakers. I listened to part of them last night, thoroughly enjoyed them, especially the one by Tom Woods, who was reminiscing about our efforts in 2007 to introduce everyone in the country to Ron Paul. Those were good
Introduce
days.
everyone
Good
to
days.
Nullify Now, which is critical indeed as well. So where do people get watch these speeches again?
Yeah, ronpaulinstitute.org. is the website, ronpaulinstitute.org. There's a column there entitled America in the Age of Trump 2.0 by Daniel McAdams. You click on that article. Inside the article is a link to the playlist of this conference.
All right. Tyler Boyd over at LouRockwell.com has an interesting column as well, Lowell.
He's talking about the Battle Hymn of the Republic, Sam, and this jarred me a little bit as I read this column. He says that he doesn't sing this hymn in his church. Now, but Sam, see, this is a hymn that I have sung from time to time in all of my life, from grade school to the present. I remember learning it in grade school, the Battle Hymn of the Republic. I've never really thought about the lyrics in terms of military conquest, however, which is what Tyler Boyd was talking about in his column. So I'm going to want to get your opinion on this, but Tyler Boyd does not sing this anthem in his church. Others around him do, but he does not, because he believes the message, the lyrics of this hymn are profoundly anti-Christian.
And I think if you take it the way he does, that's true. I look at it a little differently.
Yeah.
I look at it as the war in heaven was fought because Satan wanted to destroy all of our agency, and God said no and cast Satan down. And now we're on the earth with that battle continuing between God, or Jesus Christ, and Satan. Which master will you enlist to obey? And when you think of it that way, I think the lyrics, to me, make more sense, and I agree with them. So I understand what he's saying. I get the perspective, and I'm as anti-war as he is, but I look at this as a bigger war that is referred to in this hymn. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, well, and I particularly like the last verse, Sam. In the beauty of the lilies, Christ was born across the sea with a glory in his bosom that transfigures you and me. As he died to make men holy, let us live to make men free while God is marching on.
And that's why I say that it relates more to liberty and more to freedom and more the battle of, right versus wrong agency instead of a specific war or because what if you don't live in the United States? Or what if you sang this hymn before the United States was? Or all I'm saying is that I think it focuses on a broader discussion, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think so too, Sam. But it was, I welcome columns that challenge my thinking. It makes me think, and
well, it lets you think, is he right? And to some degree, he is right. And it also helps you think and say, hey, do I agree with him? And if so, good. And if not, why not? It's okay to have that. That's what it's kind of designed to focus on. Last one, there's a documentary film, Lowell.
That's right. Documentary film crew from Japan in Utah last week. They interviewed at least two people that I know, Brianne Dressen and Kristen Chevrier. The film crew, they want to know really what we have done here to get the word out about the dangers of the COVID shot, the kill shot, the so-called vaccine or gene therapy shot. I know they were here. This is not just rumor.
You got to tell about Liberty Roundtable, because that's one thing we've done. We've fought against this the whole time, right from the very beginning.
That's right. They were here because they used a conference room in my office building. I hosted the interview that they did with Kristen Chevrier. It was really quite interesting to see. The producer does not speak much English, much at all. And so he would ask a question in Japanese. Well, his videographer, who actually resides in L.A., the other two came from Japan. They came from Sendai, Japan, to the U.S. to do this filming. But the videographer they hired speaks both Japanese and English. And so the videographer would translate the question into English for Kristen, and then she would reply to the producer on film, in English. And then the videographer would translate her response back into Japanese for the interviewer, the one who is in charge of this production. So it was a great session. It lasted probably an hour and a half. Great topics were discussed. And see, Sam, apparently movies like Vaxxed, apparently they've really not circulated much in Japan. That surprises me. But it shouldn't surprise me because, these regimes around the world that wanted to suppress this type of information, they're still in control, for the most part. Not everybody has a Donald Trump, shaking things up. And so this film crew, they're taking home a documentary, they're going to show it around, and they're going to try to replicate in Japan what we have done here in the United States, getting the word out about the dangers of the COVID kill shot. Sam?
Wow, good for them. Again, the new media is taking center stage. This is an example. You're seeing a sea change The question is, will we the people take advantage of it and promote God, family, and country? And will we eventually protect life, liberty, and property? If so, this broadcast is successful. LibertyRoundtable.com. CampaignForLiberty.org. Thank you, Lowell.
You're welcome, Sam. My pleasure to be with you.
LovingLiberty.net. Spread the word, share the love, and God save the Republic of the United States of America.